Good morning and welcome to Friday's OTB AM. It's Adrian with you this morning, and as always, alongside me, Owen, good morning to you.
Very good morning.
How are you getting on?
Very well.
We always talk about what are the plans for the weekend. They always involve, mostly involve Kerry.
Yeah, I guess only 2 more weeks, well, hopefully a second week left of watching Kerry.
We're only like literally seconds old, and already the sort of Kerry superiority complex has come out in you.
It's not really a superiority complex when you have an 11-point cushion on somebody. So
I'm just saying that you could look extremely foolish now come Monday.
I am going to Roscommon on Sunday. If I was fully confident that Kerry would make a league final, I would not be going on Sunday. Which what's the point? If it's a dead rubber, I don't think it's a dead rubber, but I'd be confident enough.
Totally gone back on yourself now to try.
I'd be confident enough that
you did regret saying that, didn't you?
There's 2 weeks left.
I could tell by you.
I'm confident that there will be 2 more games to see against Division 1 opposition, and the last time you'll get Division 1 opposition, it will be Sunday week until July. So you've got to take these moments when they come.
Yeah, they are. I mean, Kerry are going through. There is a possibility, an outside possibility of a Galway Mayo final, which is a neutral in this particular conversation. I'd be delighted to see. I think that that rivalry is bubbled up nicely, primarily because Mayo, who are the perceived better team, have not been the better team in that matchup over the last few years. And Galway actually, in a lot of ways, don't really get the credit they deserve. Like, they've been the top 4 or 5 team for the last couple of years, but nobody ever really talks seriously about them actually winning the thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure is that perception changing this year. I would definitely be one of those people 12 months ago who'd be very strong in the idea that this Galway thing is a flash in the pan. There's no chance that they're as good as Mayo. I'm really doubting that now, especially after what we saw in McHale Park a few weeks ago. I know the conditions were bad that night, but I think that all things considered, if you had them playing 10 weeks in a row with their strongest team, no injury and fitness wasn't an issue, I think Galway would win 5 of the games. I think it's that close at the moment, and Mayo would win the other 5. So it's neck and neck, and maybe that will be the better league final.
What are your general thoughts on Galway football?
My general thoughts on Galway football.
Fran, you like Galway football? Because Kerry and Galway would be very closely aligned, wouldn't they, in terms of their general style, that sort of free-flowing, style.
It's not really something that we've seen from Galway over the last few years, is it?
Not this Kevin Walsh team, no.
Not in this Kevin Walsh team, but then you look at what Cura Finn did on Monday, and that was absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
It was beautiful, it was heartwarming, it was all the things you want to see from football being played at its best, and Galway have been known to do that. Johnny Ward was very interesting on the show on Tuesday morning, actually saying that when will the Galway public start to get a little bit frustrated by the style? He thinks that people are already voting with their feet out west, but maybe there's an opportunity now after what we saw on Monday for Kevin Walsh to tweak things a little bit.
Well, he may and may not. I mean, they'll come back no matter what sort of style of football they're playing, as long as they're winning. You know?
Yeah.
We got away from the initial question about your general thoughts about Galway football and where you stand on them. What's your take on Galway football?
Well, as I've said, I would have previously said that I didn't rate this Galway team. My opinion has changed quite a bit over the course of this league campaign.
I'd like to see Galway doing well outside of Kerry, is what I'm saying to you.
Would I like to see Galway do? Not particularly, to be honest. Like, I
don't like them, or are you?
I don't know why. I don't really have. If they won an All Ireland, I'd be like, oh, that's great to see somebody else win an All Ireland. Yeah. But I wouldn't be like, oh, my heart is warmed. Like, say we were all
actively
warmed
dislike them.
by
what I'm saying to you.
Limerick last year in the hurling. I actively dislike.
You don't actively dislike them.
I wouldn't say I actively dislike them, no, but I don't actively like them all the same. I don't really actively like any other county in Division 1, to be quite honest with you.
Right.
Cavan are all right.
Cavan
and Roscommon are grand.
Yeah, that's because
but the rest of the actual contenders, I think I actually am a bit nah towards them, because I see them as a threat.
Also, if I'm Roscommon now this weekend, that's going up in the dressing room wall straight away.
I said I kind of like them.
Roscommon are not a threat, slams Sheehan.
I do think they're a threat for the All Ireland.
Roscommon?
Yeah.
No.
Well, that's my point.
It doesn't matter, I'm from Westmeath, it's grand. Declan Rice, I don't know if we're ever going to get through a full day without discussing Declan Rice, and we do it again today because obviously he's back in the headlines, and we'll give you a flavour of some of those in just a few minutes' time. In relation to his comments on Instagram, I don't even know if you could sort of go as far as to call them comments on Instagram. You can have a look at them there. In response to Tyreek Wilson 2015, there was that one, and then there was another one that was a little bit, but there was a bit more detail on it.
It's hashtag up the RA for anybody listening and who somehow missed that yesterday. Declan Rice, 210 weeks ago, 3 nights.
And there was a second one as well where he was like, expressing his camaraderie with his teammate, I believe. There isn't nobody suggesting that for a second. He also issued this apology that he's aware that a poorly expressed comment that he made when he was a junior player has been circulated on social media. I recognise now that my attempt to show support from my teammates at the time could be negatively interpreted. While my naive words were not meant to be a political opinion and do not represent who I am, I sincerely apologise for any offence caused. So that's that. He's put his manager, obviously at England, in an incredibly awkward conversation. You can only imagine Gareth Southgate's reaction as he picks up, he's on Twitter, isn't he? I presume he comes across it in social media in some environment and he's like, Jesus Christ, Declan, what are you doing to me here? And so he's forced to come out and say, oh look, he essentially gave a bit of a version of Declan Rice's statement. It's by the way, if it was needed further evidence that Declan Rice clearly never thought he was good enough to play for England. That's the only thing I'm taking away from these comments, that they were the comments of somebody who never in a million years imagined that they were going to be a good enough player to don the famous 3 lines.
Or somebody who was a teenager.
Both of those things, but you know, also if he, in some stretch of his imagination, thought, you know, I'm on this path, it looks like I'm going to become a professional footballer of some significance, I might one day play for England, I might not write this thing. He never thought that for 1 second.
Because he was a kid.
And he didn't understand what he was writing. I get all of that. I did feel that Gareth Southgate could have been, I think he was quite generous to Declan Rice in his comments, is how I'd phrase it. And I understand why that might be, in terms of, obviously, he's his manager and there's a bit of protectionism there. He could have, I believe, protected him while still... he could have gone a bit stronger for me on the significance of a comment like this, because I think that we over here have viewed that in a very different way than it would be perceived 20 years ago, for sure, or how it would be perceived in the UK, because obviously the IRA there are and here are a pretty barbaric organisation who are responsible for a lot of pretty evil deeds, and you know, there is definitely a very different relationship with that dynamic here than there is there. And I wondered if, given his position, Gareth Southgate couldn't have been a bit stronger to have come out and said, listen, you know, we couldn't in any way stand over or endorse any of this kind of commentary. You know, we wouldn't stand over any of this kind of stuff if it came to a National Front conversation, let's say, in relation to any of his players or in relation to any supporters and like that. I do think he could have been, given the history that's there with what the IRA have done in British society, I do think he could have been a bit stronger on that, while still protecting his player.
I think you're correct to some extent in that. Like, I think Declan Rice's apology was most certainly to English people and not to Irish people, because on this side of the water, it's hilarious, really. In its naivety. In its naivety, I think, given the context of everything that's happened over the last couple of weeks, you can't but laugh at this. If you had said to me yesterday, imagine if you went through Declan Rice's Instagram comments and he said up the ra in his comments, I probably would be laughing for about 5 minutes. I actually had gone for a nap yesterday afternoon, and I woke up and I thought I was dreaming. I thought I was in a lucid state of bizarre Declan Rice dreaming when I saw this. I could not believe my eyes. It was, Adrian, you have to admit, absolutely hilarious. He wasn't actually saying, I support a terrorism group, when he makes that flippant phrase. It is a phrase that's thrown around with huge irony, and ultimately this is just another example of why people like you are very lucky that social media came along when it did. People of a certain age,
I don't know what you're saying.
People of your age, people under the age of 25 have unfortunately been brought into the social media age at a naive age, where they will say things that will live with them forever. Yeah. Stupid things, and stupid is actually, I think, a strong word to describe this. It was a flippant remark. At best, it was ironic. That's what the phrase.
I would say stupid. I would say beyond stupid.
And ultimately, we can't speak. Well, you just did on an English on an English perspective. But
I think it's important to represent that it's not something that I've heard overly, and actually that's just the essence of my point, that actually I agree with everything you're saying there. But I just think that you do consider it for a second in an English context and think that Gareth Southgate could have come out, given the history, because that is, while Declan Rice's comments were stupid and naive and idiotic and all of those things. I think that's
even a little bit hard, calling it idiotic. It's naive.
Absolutely. There is
he's being ironic.
I don't believe he's been. The body of evidence.
Not being ironic.
The body of evidence when it comes to Declan Rice, to say that he was being in some way ironic, which would give him some credibility in terms of having some intelligence in this debate, I haven't seen any evidence for that.
It's like saying Leitrim for Sam when they win the FBD League. It's like nobody actually believes that. And it's like him saying up the rad doesn't mean I support the IRA. It's an ironic comment.
It's very different than saying Leitrim from Sam.
But it's the exact same level of irony. You don't actually believe this thing is going to happen. Apologies to Leitrim people if I misrepresented them. But they don't, like Declan Rice making that comment.
There's no question he didn't even know what he was saying.
Actually saying it literally.
Yeah.
So what is he saying? He's saying it with a huge dose of irony, and
I don't believe that that's the case. I believe that what he's doing is he's trying to endear himself to a then Ireland teammate, and he's like, "Look, I'm sure I'm as Irish as you are." That's what I believe. That's where I believe it's coming from.
I think you can say that. But
there are other ways to do that, by the way, without having to support the IRA, I guess.
He's not supporting the IRA, Adrian.
I understand that. I literally started off my comments with saying I don't believe for a second that he even understood what he was saying. So that's a given.
Like it's open season on Declan Rice. I would love to be able to go and go 2-footed in on Declan Rice this morning, but I just can't. I could easily see myself in that situation where I come from his context, especially where he's like up the rat, something that's said around. Don't actually believe, and I'm not actually supporting the IRA and all the horrendous things they've done in the past. There is room for irony here. We don't have to take everything so literally. Can we not just laugh at this? Like, I can see your point that Gareth Southgate is in a very tricky situation because a lot of the supporters of that England team will have horrendous memories of what the IRA have done, and they may not grasp perhaps our black sense of humour or our sense of irony towards this. But ultimately, you have to think about the context within which Declan Rice wrote this, which is in an Irish dressing room, where this is seen as a flippant remark, a naive remark at worst.
I mean, I'm saying that I agree with almost everything you're saying. I'm just saying that I think that Gareth Southgate really probably had a duty to his own country to come out and say, to be harder on the comments, because they don't get you talk about the nuance or whatever it was there, like they don't get that, or they don't have to get it. Like,
that's true.
It's, they've had enough go on in their country to not have to understand the nuance of that stuff. So that's my take on it today.
No, I agree. Southgate, I agree to a point. Southgate was in a tricky situation.
He could have put his arm around his own player, which was what inevitably was going to happen here, one way or the other, and still say, this is not something we get behind. Just so everybody knows, this is not something we accept in here.
Yeah.
Because the nuance that you're talking about is not something that they will have engaged with in any way, shape, or form. There's nobody on the other side of the water saying, well, we get the irony here, and that he was just trying to, like, they don't understand that at all.
Exactly. I think it's totally acceptable for an England manager to be po-faced about this. Yeah. I'm just saying on our end of things, from an Irish perspective, it's absolutely hilarious. And it is, without question, the best thing that has happened in this Declan Rice saga, the funniest thing that's happened in the Declan Rice saga, from our perspective. From their perspective, I guess offence is all subjective, and it depends on how you take it. And if you're an English person offended by it, then I think fair enough, to be quite honest.
Pretty incredible few days for Irish football, all told. You said about sort of waking up from a slumber and seeing this Declan Rice gift that had landed in your social media feeds. There's also the Saipan stuff is back on the agenda again, incredibly. Like, this is definitely not something that we sort of reared our head, and actually feeds entirely into the conversation we've just been having about. It was an appearance by Clinton Morrison on TalkSport with Jim White. I mean, no more ideal person to be speaking about Saipan too, but the conversation over there was the conversation we've had here a million times, but to them it was like, and what happened then? It was like, this is all brand new news. Clinton Morrison, he was on TalkSport yesterday. He was talking about Saipan. He gave his version of events, which most of which you've kind of heard before. We can take a quick clip of it here.
So then Mick said, well, you're out of order. He said, I don't care if I'm out of order. So they started arguing. So I'm thinking, hold on a minute. Our best player Ireland have probably produced for many, many years is there arguing with Mick. And then he said to Mick...
And the whole squad's watching it.
The whole squad's watching it. So I'm a young boy. And I'm thinking, hold on. So he says to Mick, you was a bad player anyway. You had a rubbish first touch. And you're a poor manager. The only manager I respect is Sir Alex Ferguson. And he said, and then that
soon changed.
And that soon changed, exactly. And then he changed it and went, and you're not even English. As soon as he said that, he said, and you're English, you're not even Irish. As soon as he said that, I think most people who were born in England put their head. I put my head under the table and said, please don't come for me either.
Can you not hear? I'm English. Is that what he was saying?
Potentially. It's when we hear those stories being told, on a place like TalkSport, and as you say, Jim, I was like, oh God, I actually haven't heard this particular angle before.
Saipan, you say?
Yeah. I'm sorry, have you heard all that before? Have you heard,
yeah, there was the only line that I wasn't sure I hadn't heard from the full piece was that Roy Keane had agreed to come back in again, but they'd just missed the deadline for re-registering or whatever, and Colin Healy missed out as well.
And like, if you are hearing that for the first time, you're hearing the line about the Irish Prime Minister, as Clinton Morrison puts it. He talks about that, and then he talks about Roy Keane potentially coming back. So if you're coming to that for the first time, you're like, oh, that Irish Prime Minister really did a good job in persuading Roy Keane to come back. So maybe Bertie was more influential than we thought all along.
So that was it. And then Kevin Kilbane obviously decided he was going to weigh in. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Lashes Kilbane, who was due to come on with us this morning to explain himself until he sort of, I mean, Kevin Kilbane, this tends to happen, had double booked himself. So we'll have to get that story out of him again. But yeah, I don't know, like it wasn't as if there was anything, like you were saying, that hadn't been heard before, that was all that particularly sensational.
I don't think he's been too liberal with the truth there, is he?
I thought it seemed to be just sort of the accounts that you've heard from everybody before. Like, it was a guy who was in the dressing room, as he said himself in the piece. It was him, Steve Finnan, and then Roy. Like, he had a bloody hell, a box office seat for the greatest occurrence, I mean, in the grim sense, in Irish sport of all time. What a seat that would be, you know. So,
well, you talk about technology not being around back in the day. If only there was like a
video footage or something,
or somebody just clicked record on WhatsApp voice memo or something like that, then the truth could never get in the way of a good story.
So that was that with Saipan, and that's the way things were going yesterday. And obviously we are on the eve of a brand new era of Irish football as well, with Mick McCarthy returning and the mighty Gibraltar standing in our way. So we might have some discussion about that a little bit later today as well, about how Ireland might go, how the team might line up. Feel free to get in contact with us with any of that stuff over the next little bit. We're going to tell you what's happening in the back pages in just a few minutes' time. Also, it's a huge weekend in the GAA. Just who's going to make the final? Will it be Kerry, Mayo or Galway? We'll discuss all of that shake-up that's coming your way in about 5 or 6 minutes' time. As I said, we'll talk about Irish football as well. The sports news with Darren Cleary coming your way just after 8:30. We have rugby a little bit later in the day. That's at 9:15. We're going to have Alan Quinlan and Andy Dunne debating just who is to blame for the current malaise in Irish rugby. So they'll be coming your way just before 9 o'clock. And Owen's been speaking to the Irish Rugby Spy as well, Seán Hartnett.
Yeah, I think we can actually play a clip from that. He's coming up a little bit later on. How did he break into the building? How easy are we talking here? Could I have broken into it, or would he need your level of expertise?
No. It was, I don't want to say too much, because obviously I'd be revealing how you would do it, and I don't want to do that for security of other premises, but let's just say I undid 2 screws and shorted the power and I was into the main building.
Right. That's not something I could do.
Yeah, of course it is. Take 2 screws off the top and put the 2 wires together and the power will drop.
Right. Like that would be kind of your bread and butter from your background.
Yeah, if you wouldn't have to be a former covert surveillance operator to do that. You could be someone who just understands basic power on a lock.
Come on. Anybody can do that.
I let myself down there, didn't I?
You really did.
Yeah. He's obviously talking about breaking into the IRFU HQ. So you can't do that now. But if you wanted to do that 15 years ago, all you needed to do was a screwdriver and a nifty pair of fingers. He's
written this book, Seán Hartnett, Client Confidential, not his real name, it turns out. It took me the sort of, having listened to the piece already, about 3/4 of the way through before it dawned on me that of course it wasn't the guy's real name. And yeah, so the essence of the story is that the IRFU called an agency in who then employed him to come in and do some surveillance work for them. And he gives his account of that, and the IRFU say that a lot of this is fictionalised. Is that the...
Yeah, fictionalised and things like that. They released a statement the other day. We'll read the full statement out a little bit later on as well. So it's an interesting story, really, isn't it? I don't think too much of the information is damning at all from an IRFU perspective. Myself and Joe were talking about this the other morning, and if I was in their position and there was information being leaked, I'd probably go above and beyond the line of duty to try and clear it up. So I don't think there's much of a red-faced situation here from their perspective.
No, not at all. I think actually it reflects quite well on them that this was proactive. And particularly it was like 10 years ago, whatever it was, when, you know, this, you didn't really tend to hear very much about that sort of stuff. But yeah, they have said that they continue to conduct such assessments across all business operations, as you might imagine. And they also say the telling line in their IRFU statement, it's apparent that the author of Client Confidential has fictionalised many elements in the account of the IRFU's engagement with RMI, who were the agency that he's exercised extreme degrees of artistic licence in his portrayal of the process undertaken. He sees it slightly differently. Yeah, we did put that to him as well in the piece, and he says, nah, that's not the case, it's all true. Yeah. Righto, on the newspapers this morning at 8:05, good morning to you if you're just joining us. Keep your comments coming into us as well on the hashtag OTB AM. We'll bring you those over the next hour. So the Irish Times are going to kick off, and it's a picture of Seán Maguire going through his stretches in Gibraltar. In fact, he's climbing over a hoarding is what's going on there in Gibraltar. Emmett Malone has made his way over to Gibraltar Ireland Hub to put on a real show on a plastic pitch is the headline there. Also, United to match excessive Barcelona ticket price, writing Michael Butler here, that Manchester United are to subsidise the €118 cost for a ticket at Barcelona for the second leg of their Champions League quarter-final. They've taken a difficult decision to charge the same price for Barcelona supporters at Old Trafford. So if you can do it to us, we can jolly well do it back to you, I think is what's happening there with United. Yeah, exactly. I see that you could make the argument that, well, some fan is going to get ripped off. So it's a bit ironic that Manchester United are doing that to Barcelona fans. But then ultimately, it's their football club. They've got to look after their own fans first. And I think if they're stuck in a difficult situation like that, they may as well put it onto the opposing fans. So Barcelona are obviously the ones at fault here. Like, that's 120 quid. It's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot, especially for a stadium the size of the new camp as well. Yeah. Like, it's do they really need to charge that much to make a sizable profit off each game? It's such a key game that, like, you will get people. There's no point in taking a protest against it, or there's no point saying I'll sit this one out. Like, it's not the game that comes around every week. It's not like, I've missed Huddersfield this week, sure, I'll go to Bournemouth the following week. That's the thing, and like that's one of the things that really stuck out to me from the Champions League draw is how there's so many novel pairings here, with the exception, of course, Manchester City against Tottenham Hotspur. But also you get the sense around Barcelona at the moment that it's not just that pairing, it is the sense that every time you go to see Barcelona now could be the last time you see Lionel Messi at his peak. And they're cashing in. Like, there's no sense that Lionel Messi is going to become a bad footballer anytime soon, but at his very peak, at the best Lionel Messi. Some people thought it was over, but it seems to still be apparent, as we saw against Betis last weekend. So every ticket you buy for a Barcelona game could become a collector's item now. Nathan Murphy, by the way, has left his Twitter account open again this morning. Any suggestions actually for... well, it's pretty obvious what you tweet. Hashtag up the Ra. The Irish Examiner this morning is also some shots of Ireland in preparation for this game against Gibraltar tomorrow night. Seán Maguire bids to do himself justice in green, and by all accounts may get his opportunity tomorrow evening, and Robbie Keane's giving him a pep talk with one of the main lines across a lot of the papers today. Thoughts of Ronan O'Gara in the newspaper as well this morning, including further reflections on the tragedies in Christchurch, of course, last week. That is the Irish Examiner this morning. And the Times Ireland edition, it's a shot at Declan Rice, as you can see there, with the 3 lines on his shirt in training yesterday. Southgate gives Rice his backing, writes Paul Joyce there on those comments, and Maguire has to make the most of his chance. I said it really is the story that's leading most of those newspapers there. Expect England to make a flying start. Dan Childs here on the Racing Post ahead of their Euro 2020 qualifier against the Czech Republic tonight, I think. Is that right? Yeah, nice. Finally, for me, the Irish Independent has some good shots of Mick McCarthy arriving at the airport in Gibraltar yesterday, shaking hands with some of the local bobbies. This was him about to get his second spell in charge of the Republic of Ireland underway. There, McCarthy tells players to block out pitch battle. This is the plastic pitch, writes Dan McCarthy there. And league set to finish with Croke Park double header, writes Colin Keys. The Hurling and Football League finals are now virtually certain to share the same Croke Park billing on Sunday week, regardless of what counties are involved, or any deferral of the Division 3 football final that may be required as well. So, I mean, you probably still don't get a packed house, but better atmosphere, more people in the ground, better sense of occasion?
I think it's a good idea. It's worth trying out different things like that. It's unusual, isn't it, for a league final to be her league hurling final to be played in Croke Park. I don't think it's happened for a few years now at this stage, but it'd be a weird experience having whatever it may be. I guess, on one side of things, you've got...
it'll be Galway and Kerry, right?
Well, and then you could potentially have Galway in both codes, which would be interesting to see if that'll actually have a bigger house overall than, say, Galway in an All-Ireland semi-final in football last year.
You probably need 4 counties, really. 4 different counties to try and beef up your attendance numbers a little bit, I would think.
Yeah.
The club finals probably suffered a small bit from that too. Like, you would have had a lot of floating voters in Galway that would have been going along to support both counties in a way that... So you were missing out on the floating voters of a full other county, I suppose.
Well, who knows? There is still a potential that, you know, Galway go to Healy Park this weekend and get beaten, or don't get the win and Mayo actually qualify. So you could have a situation where you've got Kerry, Mayo, Galway and Dublin or Limerick as the 4 counties there on league final day, which is 4 big counties, 4 decent support groups. So it could be like just a real nice mix of supporters in Croke Park on Sunday week. The Irish Daily Mail is leading with Rice's regret, England star's apology for IRA comment, and rocking up with a plan of action is the headline of the Irish players getting off the plane in Gibraltar. The Herald goes with no excuses. Plastic pitch and small stadium not an issue for Ireland, says Mick, and Gibraltar are planning a surprise, writes Aidan Fitzmaurice. So they're keeping the cards close to the chest. They only named their 25-man squad for the qualifier yesterday. So Gibraltar with something up their sleeve potentially. The back page of the Mirror is a trained thriller. Maguire hoping advice from lethal legend Keane will see him hit the target on the rock, and Astro is a no-go for excuses. You've also got San Marino will smell blood now, just when you thought sorry Scots couldn't sink any lower. They lost 3-0 to Kazakhstan last night, and Craig Gordon after the game was saying the players have to pick themselves up, but San Marino might fancy their chances after seeing that result. Really would be a dire situation for McLeish's side if they were to go down to San Marino. I was
listening to, as I tend to do on the way in here on Friday morning TalkSport this morning, as you know, I generally try and just recount it verbatim when I come into the office. There was Alan Brazil and Ali McCoy's done.
Oh, that would have been perfect.
They didn't. The general conversation was that they weren't accepting any texts or emails or any callers for the day, that they'd had enough of it. But not laying any blame at the door of Alex McLeish. Bizarrely, they were saying that, well, the players are good enough, so that's not Alex McLeish's fault. Whereas actually, like, if the players are good enough, is that not the manager's fault entirely? So, look, I don't know. It's the worst result in the history of Scottish football is how this one is being portrayed. So that'll give you a bit of an idea of the significance. And when we're feeling pretty shit about ourselves and where we're at in the grand football, they were actually, I mean, not with any degree of detail, by the way, but holding Ireland up as the... one of these examples is these great nations that are bringing through a lot of young players. I mean, not entirely true. I'm not sure we get beaten 3-0 by Kazakhstan, mind you.
Have you seen Stan and Ollie yet?
I haven't. No, I will go and see it at some point, but I haven't seen it.
Do you know which football manager makes a cameo appearance in it? Not really a cameo, he's an extra in it.
I mean, it must be Alex McLeish.
It's Alex McLeish. Yeah, he met. I think he met Steve Coogan on a plane, and he was saying how much of a fan he is of Laurel and Hardy. Wow. And he was like, "Why don't you come and be an extra?" So Kazakhstan Laurel is the headline in the Sun on this. There's been a lot of Borat jokes made, and a lot of jokes about comedies of errors and all that sort of thing. So Alex McLeish, like, I think it's fairly harmless appearing in a... I would definitely have done it.
Why would you not do it?
In that, especially if you're a big fan. But certainly there's plenty of pun potential across the newspapers this morning. At the back
there's also the opportunity to go from that conversation, Alex McLeish, Steve Coogan, and all the way back to Declan Rice.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Back page of the Sun is Minnow bother to you. Sean told to whack small fry like Robbie. Great headline on the back page of the Sun. Got Nuno versus Lamps as well. It's an exclusive by Martin Lipton this morning. Chelsea want Nuno Espirito Santo or Frank Lampard to replace Maurizio Sarri. Two exciting enough prospects, I would have thought, if you're a Chelsea supporter. And what the heck is the headline on the Scotland
front page as well also is...
yes.
I think we call it sport.
Decky Orlaw. Ireland's turncoat sorry for naive Provo comment. That's a great headline there as well. Up there at wait till we draw England was his other comment that we didn't show at the top of the show. The back page of the Irish Daily Star is Stranger Things. Kerr calls for clarity over €100,000 FAI loan. You've got Maguire will get his rest. This is Seán Maguire speaking in the press yesterday. He doesn't train on a Monday. Preston have figured out that you're better off just not training on a Monday. You're better off going into the gym an hour before training on, let's say, a Tuesday, making sure you're ready to rock. Because of his explosive playing style, he's been very, very prone to injuries, missed a lot of game time, and they feel that, you know, the happy medium is for him to just skip a day of training every day. You've also got here on the back page of the Irish Daily Star, United targets €75 million Harry. So United are confident of landing Harry Maguire this summer in a €75 million deal. And then finally, The Guardian...
Fascinating, by the way. Sorry, the Monday thing was... We'll definitely come back to that at some point. Just the idea that they've reached a stage where they can say, do you know what, you sit it out. And, like, of yore, that would have been, soft touch, Seán Maguire, like, just not able to get out and mix it up with the rest of the lads. But that's really clever management.
Yeah, the question from an Irish perspective then this week is, like, do you start him for Gibraltar? If he is, in my view, he's Ireland's strongest striker in the squad at the moment, once Shane Long was removed from it. So I think he has to start against Georgia. And
no-brainer.
He has to start against Georgia, though.
Yeah, but, you know, you assume that whichever team starts against Gibraltar, barring injuries or anything else, that's the same team that starts against Georgia. Like, from Mick McCarthy's point of view, he's not testing anybody tomorrow night. He's going to pick his best available 11.
But I mean, in terms of wrapping him in cotton wool, given his injury profile.
No, I think get him in there and, Jesus, let him at it.
The Guardian goes with England standby Rice. Midfielder apologises for apparent pro-IRA post. There he was training with Dele Alli at England's training centre in Burton yesterday. So, yeah, they're up against Czech Republic tonight. I'm actually excited to see how Declan Rice goes in an England jersey, just from a purely, let's park everything for a moment, footballing perspective.
That'll last for about 10 seconds on before you're jeering at him. How do you think I'm fascinated to sort of think when he rocks up at training and Harry Kane is like, all right, mate, anything going on recently? It's like, oh, I said something stupid on Instagram. How do those, I wonder how those conversations go.
It's definitely just kind of like
They just laugh it off?
Yeah, well, Harry Kane...
we've all done that, mate.
Harry Kane being a good Irishman himself would be like, I get the irony, I get the joke. So there's just a little cohort of Irishmen in the English dressing room who actually know it. So Maguire, Rice and Kane stand in solidarity for a stupid Instagram post 5 years ago.
That's it?
That's it from the newspapers from my perspective.
Okay, cool. We are going to be joined by Alan Quinlan and Andy Dunne a little bit later on. We're going to get stuck into... It's been a traumatic couple of months in the world of Irish rugby, so we've lots to talk to the lads about, and they've slightly differing opinions as well on what's been going wrong and how we should fix it. So we'll bring you that debate a little bit later in the day, and Owen's extended interview with the Irish Rugby Spy as well coming your way around about 9 o'clock. But before that, we're getting into some of the GAA. It's a big weekend ahead. First, a snippet from episode 7 of the Shot Clock with Kieran Donaghy. Here's Kieran on how to deal with trolls.
Absolutely, yeah. Talia Harris, unbelievable photo, serious athleticism. I have 2 daughters, Darren, if they're going to go on and play football or basketball at any code, and the relative body is going to put up a picture of them in action. As you said, if these dickheads are going to come in with this kind of stuff, it's reckless. And us as men and people in general have to start calling out these people. And, you know, like these people, like you know, we have inter-county players, the soccer players, they've been bullied online on a regular basis. You know, like, we can have opinions on people, but these people that go online, these trolls that go on and put up this stuff, actually put it out there on their feed, and, you know, everybody else lets them away with it instead of calling them out and saying, hey man, you're way overboard there. You know, I think we need to get a bit harder on the trolls and actually kind of almost embarrass them into the point of, you know, like, what are you doing here? It's such a terrible act. It's bullying. It's a form of bullying. I talk about it in my basketball camp every year. You know, don't stand for it. But I think we as adults stand for it on WhatsApp groups. We stand for it on Twitter, on social media, because, you know, will we bother even messing with this fella? I know they don't have many followers, these trolls, but still, what they're saying is an absolute disgrace, and they should be ashamed of themselves, and even their family members should be ashamed of them.
And the AFL for taking the photograph down should be ashamed as well.
Yeah, I think they probably panicked a bit. You know what I mean? You know, it's you know, they put it back up, they reinstated the photo, they apologised. It was a bad move by them, but, you know, it's these fools that are on sitting down on their computer that have never done a stitch in their life, they want to call out athletes every day for not performing to their best.
Yourself and Brian Cooper last week had a good idea about giving training to young players coming through, young sports people coming through, having to deal with this on the other side. So if you are a sports person who is a victim of this, actually learning to go, okay, yeah, I need to be able to somehow distance myself from this, because it's not easy. You read it, you kind of find yourself drawn to it.
I'm well used to it, and I spoke with Annie Geary, who were doing the Reloaded show on Air Sport together this year, and Anna was saying when she was doing the dancing, there was vile stuff coming in with her, and she was trying not to read it, but some of it was hard to deal with. And I was kind of like saying, Anna, you know, these people have done nothing ever. They're just absolute fools. Like, can you differentiate from the real person that wants to talk to you about something? But that's my outlook on it. Like, I can spot the trolls a mile away and never interact with them. It's a waste of time. You know, they've nothing going on. So yeah, certainly some training for all young sports stars coming through, whether that be from county boards or the FAI or the rugby union, whatever. But every sport coach should have a bit of training how to deal with trolls.
It's brilliant to hear somebody like Ciarán Donaghy in his position, given his standing in society, given his track record in sport over the last 15 years, come out as strongly as that. Like, I think that's the sort of thing that we've probably been missing, that, you know, in terms of role models for all of us of any age, to be listening to somebody like Ciarán Donaghy saying, listen, you know, you need to, that pops up in your WhatsApp group, take it on, challenge it.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, addressing that sort of thing head on is obviously the way to do it. The AFL situation was, it was a little bit demoralising, wasn't it? That they would just actually kind of bottle it and remove the post. Yeah,
I mean, like, that's a function of the other, right? That this thing blows up and they're like, oh crap, we need to take some sort of affirmative action here. And at the end, it turned out it's the wrong action. And to be fair to them, they didn't double down on their mistake. They came out and said, actually, we shouldn't have done that. We're going to repost it again. And I think that's what matters, right? Like, it's the sense that we're all left with in terms of what's right and wrong. And yeah, just for me, I think, listen to Ciarán Donaghy there. I hope that people sit up and take notice and that it has a bit of an impact.
It's hard to teach that, though, I'd imagine. It's hard to actually say to somebody that, listen, that person's opinion doesn't matter if that person's opinion is actually having an effect on you or whatever, even if the opinion is actually relatively worthless. Like, when it comes to Ciarán Donaghy, it's pretty clear that from his character on the pitch, he's definitely not one of those people who would have let that sort of stuff affect him.
You don't know either, you know, like, it's like, you can imagine like bolshy players who would have been full of personality and strength, like physical strength and that sort of stuff. You could see how in a quiet moment, and you hear plenty of players speak about it, that they would be affected by, you know, at your weakest moment you happen to just lash on Twitter and suddenly there's somebody up there saying nasty things about you. It tends to happen. Like, it happens all the time, right? Like, we have some sort of level of exposure to that as well. And there are a lot of crazy bastards out there that will just say sort of whatever's in their mind. They don't, I think frequently, Ciarán calls them fools. I think that's probably accurate enough that I think frequently they don't ever consider the fact that when they've written something that it actually will find the eye or the ear of the intended party. And like, it's nasty. It's not the sort of stuff you wouldn't walk into a pub and go over and go, here Ciarán, geez, you played woefully there at the weekend. Like, you just wouldn't really generally tend to do that. But obviously when you're on your phone or whatever. I also don't believe that it's like social media tends to be a bit of a catch-all phrase for a lot of this stuff. I think that bullying and poor behaviour does happen in society. I think that that's just the medium by which now we're mainly communicating with each other on a mass scale, and that's why it tends to come about in that way. I don't think it's as negative place as people tend to portray it. Yeah, there's a bit of safety in the online curtain, but there's also a bit of safety in numbers as well. So I'd wonder, does it take less balls to be one of the people in the hill who's booing Ciarán Donaghy when he comes on to play for Kerry a couple of years ago, or does it take less balls to actually tweet him? Which is the most cowardly act? Because I always found that a little bit bizarre, to be honest with you. And like, Dublin fans were probably the worst culprits for that. He just got booed every time he came on, whenever the name came on, and obviously some of that was ironic too, though.
Was it?
Some of it was definitely. I mean,
I'm glad you said that, because I never actually thought that it was ironic. I always was just a little bit confused by it. I was like, this is...
Well, it's the pantomime villain.
This is the guy who had his eye gouged, not the other way around. Let's remember that.
But they don't care about that.
Well, yeah.
You know, I think there's always a bit of pantomime villain about that booing. You know, like, oh, here he comes. You know, they love to see it. Like, that's the... Surely, no?
Yeah. Well, maybe. I hope that's the case. I hope you're right. I've never kind of thought about that. I always just kind of thought, geez, that's why is this guy getting this sort of reaction? And this is kind of like before the kind of incident with Aidan O'Shea, where I'm sure he'd admit himself that was like, that probably wasn't keeping in character or anything like that. And if people booed him after that, you might say, well, maybe there's a reason for that. It might not be the best reason in the world, but at least there's a reason for that. This is before that.
But that's why I'd say there was something slightly ironic about it. That
maybe I'm sure we'll be able to ask him sometime. But
irony is
I never understood that.
Irony is the phrase du jour. So a lot of games obviously this weekend, the final round of the Allianz National Football League. We had Aaron Kernan on the show last night. He was talking to Nathan. Here he is talking about Mickey Harte and Tyrone and their changing style of play.
This has been said for almost 10 years now, and Mickey Harte has been very reluctant to change. I have heard interviews of him saying this year, they felt it was important to mix your game up. You couldn't have it all running, and it can't be all direct ball. And I suppose from a neutral perspective, it's good to hear that there, because I genuinely felt that they were wasting their talents, none more so than Matty Donnelly. He spent the majority of last year been that extra man back. You're speaking about it with Kieran McGeary now. The All-Ireland final, I was sitting in it and I just couldn't believe how much he was playing behind his own midfield. He offered no attacking threat at all, no scoring threat. And to me, to be honest with you, I just think you're wasting the God-given talents that he has.
So I wonder where this change came from then over the winter. Was it Stephen O'Neill who was trying, maybe Mickey Harte was putting a little bit more trust in him and allowing him to implement a slightly different game plan?
Yeah, maybe so. And to be fair, what I could never understand is, this isn't the way Tyrone won the 3 All-Irelands. I know if you go back to that Kerry game in 2003, yes, Pat Spillane said the puke football thing and they'd swarm defence and that there. But you look at the forwards that they had at that time, they didn't have 14 men standing behind the ball and one man isolated up front. They were going with a full forward line of Mulligan, Stephen O'Neill, Canavan. You had Dooher, and in fairness, maybe it was Ryan Mellon as working wing half forwards. But you had, at that stage, probably the best centre half forward in the country, and Brian McGuigan as the pivot, the outlet pass all the time, got it to him in the 45, and then he was able to give a quality ball to the dangerous inside men. You think Tyrone are going to get one over on Galway this weekend?
I think so, yeah. Tyrone are the form team, aren't they? They're absolutely flying at the moment. And up at home in Healy Park, I don't think they'll make a league final, because I think Mayo are going to win at home this weekend to Monaghan. But I just can't really see a situation where this Tyrone momentum has to stop. I just think that Mickey Harte has found something now, which is an ingredient that will allow them to beat the best teams in the country, which, to be fair, they have done to a certain extent over the past couple of years. You don't get to an All-Ireland final unless you've beaten some pretty good teams. Now, if you put them up against the likes of a Mayo or a Kerry in an All-Ireland semi-final this year, if they're playing the way they're playing now, you give them every chance of winning that game. They've finally backed their forwards, and we used to be under the illusion that maybe Tyrone's forwards weren't good enough. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe it was the system of play that they just didn't allow their forwards to be good enough. So we can see the table on screen. Tyrone on 7.
Yeah, so if Tyrone were to beat Galway and Mayo were to lose, then that's Tyrone. And I mean, because you've already said that Kerry are definitely into the final either way, so that would be Kerry-Tyrone final. Yes, it will be. I mean, there's it would be a bit of a kind of a turnaround from that perspective. We don't really expect that to happen at all. That's GAA league tables that have compiled that, by the way. You can check them out on Twitter. We probably don't expect that to happen. It must be, of all the counties in the country at the minute, it must be, to be a Galway supporter, must be one of the most sort of exciting prospects when you consider how they've been bubbling along over the last couple of years, the success that they've had. It's undoubtedly success, given I suppose it's been a while between drinks for them, and the potential that's there. The football isn't always the most attractive thing to look at, but potentially some of those players like Ian Burke featured a little bit during the league, but he's to come back in. Liam Silk, there's a couple of other younger prospects coming into that Galway team. You have Damien Comer still come back from injury. Potentially they end up tweaking their style a little bit to reflect the more attacking nature maybe of some of those players, and particularly of Cora Finn. It must be a particularly exciting time to be a Galway supporter. No question about that, especially if you're into both codes, of course. But I do wonder, if you put yourself into Kevin Walsh's shoes for just a moment,
And I'm kind of being devil's advocate to my own opinion here, because I'd certainly be of the view that Galway now have the players, especially with the Cleary lads back, to actually be a bit more adventurous. And it's a risk because they did so well last year, but I think it's a necessary risk if they actually have designs of making an All-Ireland final. But if you put yourself into Kevin Walsh's shoes, that is a hard thing to depart from. A system that got you to an All-Ireland semi-final for the first time since 2001 last year. Like, that was a big year from a Galway perspective, and he has to have a lot of conviction in that style of play, a level of conviction that he will now believe that will allow them to take them over the line this year. He has to have that conviction.
It's not a hard thing to depart from if you were doing it at the end of January or the start of February. It's a hard thing to depart from now because there's I
was just about to make that point. Exactly. Like that, the Cleary thing is very much a double-edged sword. First of all, you've got proof that you've got amazing footballers coming into the side. Kevin Walsh actually doesn't need that proof. So the other side of the sword, and I think it's actually more of a negative than a positive in some ways, is that first of all, you've got public perception now of Cleary and of the Galway brand of football. And if Kevin Walsh gets these Cleary lads in and plays what some people would refer to as a turgid style of play, imagine the abuse that he may get from certain pundits around the country, or, as we've been led to believe, some people within his own county, if he doesn't actually now be a little bit more adventurous. But second of all, as well, like as the point was made this week, I think was it Matty Ford or was it Shane on the Galway Football show, like where would this Cleary team actually be? I think there'd be a Division 2 team, but some people are saying they'd actually be a Division 3 team. That we have to remember, this is still club football. You can't just allow
their style of play might go against them straight off the bat.
Well, that's it. Like, I mean, a strain of club players isn't going to be the influential momentum behind the county team's direction of play, is it? So I think Kevin Walsh is in a little bit of a tricky situation there. He can't really listen too much to the public perception. And I know, as I say, I'm being devil's advocate to my own opinion here, because I think he really should be kind of thinking about changing things a little bit. But I don't know. The same thing kind of goes a little bit for Kerry this year. If they kind of get bodies behind the ball, it doesn't matter how effective it is. If it's not attractive football, you're leaving yourself a little bit more open to more criticism.
I think that's the slight difference between Kerry and almost every other county in the country, that Kerry want to win and they want to play well doing it. I think most other teams in the country, probably barring Dublin, to be fair, there's no chance of them playing a turgid football, as you describe it, anytime soon. But I think from a Galway
turgid is a bit strong, to be fair, shouldn't it?
If they, and we'll continue with it because I can't come up with any other word off the top of my head, more defensive football. If Galway play more defensive football for the course of the year and get to an All-Ireland final or win an All-Ireland final, Galway fans won't give a toss.
No, like I think as well, to defend Galway here a small bit, you talk about the best games in last year's championship. If you had to pick the 3 best games, like Galway probably feature in the top 3, like their game against Kildare last year in Newbridge was one of the games of the summer. That and Armagh against Roscommon.
That was the Newbridge or nowhere game, was it?
No, it wasn't. That was Mayo.
Mayo, right.
It was in the Super 8s. It was the second round. It was the same. The 3 best games last year, 2 of them happened on the same day. One was Clonus, Monaghan against Kerry. The other was the curtain raiser on television that day, which was Galway against Kildare, and then the other one was Armagh against Roscommon in the qualifier. So it's not bad if you're such a crap football team that you're actually in one of the top 3 games of the summer. So maybe Galway can get into a bit of that. Maybe people were a bit protective of the idea that poor old Kerry got the life knocked out of them by Galway in Croke Park last year, and Galway are messing up what we want to be a great All-Ireland Championship, which is seeing the aristocrats going all the way. Let's not forget, it was a crap day. It was pissing rain all day long, and do Galway want to now turn on the bright lights and play some flashy football on a crap day like that? No, they don't. So you got to be a little bit more defensive of Galway in that regard. Like, if I want to give my own personal opinion here, I'd kind of say I'm not a huge fan, but ultimately there's reasons to show here that
why are you not a huge fan?
Something. As I say, it's just personal opinion that
sorry, are you, just to establish it, are you not a huge fan of this Galway team or of Galway football?
This Galway team,
right?
But all my memories are of a Galway team that would get to an All-Ireland quarter final, and once they hit Croke Park, they would bottle it. What happened to them last year? Well, they succeeded in Croke Park, so that's a huge side. It's pure bitterness on my side of things.
Owen's going to remove that chip from his shoulder, and we'll have plenty more coming your way. Alan Quinlan and Andy Dunne getting stuck into a traumatic couple of months in the world of Irish rugby. For all of that, we've a special sit down with the Irish Under-21 manager Stephen Kenny coming up over the weekend. Here's a teaser of what's in store.
I think ultimately you want you want maximum width from your back forward in possession. I always expect, I always try and instill that, to have maximum width. so that there's real distance between the centre halves when they're passing the ball, and every pass should be in front of the defenders all the time. If the right side of the centre back is missing out the left side of the centre back to play the left back, it's got to be in front of him. He's got to receive it in his stride. Okay, there's no point in fullbacks being too advanced, where we're knocking passes wide and they've got to check their stride and check back and play, because you're looking to inject pace into the game. I think the back four, it's important. The quality of the pass in the back four is very important, and I think the rotation of the midfield is hugely important as well. And I think you want flexibility in the midfield. You don't want to be rigid. I don't play with two holders and one in front or one and two. You need it's not as rigid as that. And I think you do have to have that flexibility in the midfield and that fluidity between the midfield three and the two wide players. And you want players that can interchange positions, and you want your fullbacks overlapping to supplement that. So I think that's ideally what you'd want. And but you have to have the ball to achieve that. And I think, but also the concept of the idea of having the determination to dominate possession regardless of the opposition, and how do you do that? And you can only do that by overloading the midfield and trusting your talent. We want players who can really who are willing to take the ball in fight areas. And I think if you're then, once you can control the game, the importance of injecting tempo, like the importance of injecting pace into the attacks, and deciding when to do that and when not to do that. So these are all important aspects of how you want your team to play.
Yeah, none of it's like astonishing or sort of, that's all truisms of football, I'd say, is what Stephen Kenny was going through there.
He wants to keep his cards close to his chest, isn't he? He's still a manager of a competitive football team.
We play with a bit of tempo when we need to play with tempo. We'll have great technical players who can play sort of in tight areas.
Were you expecting state secrets?
No, but I mean, I haven't seen any great evidence of these things that he talks about from an Irish team. And actually, I think that's part of the thing that I'm excited about to see from Stephen Kenny's Republic of Ireland senior team when we eventually get there, that he can bring some of these facets of the game, or facets of that he's encouraged in his own players that we've seen evidence for in Dundalk, into the senior setup. He can suddenly make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, is really what I'm saying.
If you're looking for exciting football, and if you think that's what Mick's going to bring, you're going to be really disappointed when you hear from him, because in the clip we have today, he basically says, I don't care how we win, as long as we win.
I'm with him. I couldn't give a shite. As long as
you just said you want a brand of football that's exciting.
You want a silk purse?
What I said was Stephen Kenny is going to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. As Irish supporters, if we covet the idea of watching attractive football that's also winning football, we are
delusional.
Absolutely deluded.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. I think when Stephen Kenny realises, though, that his job depends on results and not how well the team play if they lose 2 or 3-0, he'll probably just try set them up to be hard to beat and nick a goal. That is literally the Irish football psyche over the last 30 years.
Over there.
Well, no, would you have been saying the same thing about Dundalk making the group stages of the Europa League, that it's delusional to think they can get there playing an alright brand of football?
What I think probably happened with Dundalk, and I think that what we're all hoping happens in Ireland context, is that he spends a bunch of time getting the players to understand his system and become a winning team before they become in any way an expansive team. Like, there's a project to be done there. There's a process, to borrow Darren's phrasebook, in terms of sort of, achieving success over a number of years.
We should get you to do your top 5 processes.
Top 5 processes. You wouldn't like to hear number 1 of my top 5 processes. It's just complete.
The Dublin Drive for 5?
No.
It's just one long process.
It's just one long
What
process.
are we talking about?
Processes.
I know, but like, what is your number 1 on your list of, you've just completed it?
I probably have to consider my processes, to be honest.
Right. The Dubs having nothing to play for this weekend is exceptional for all us neutrals.
I mean, it's part of the process.
Are you extremely disappointed that Dublin are going to make the National Football League final for the 40th time in a row?
I'd be a little bit alarmed that I thought they would have got up to speed a little bit quicker. the fact that for most of the game, in fact all of the game, they were second best against Tyrone. We all accepted that they started back pretty late and they deserved the early defeat to Monaghan. I thought I saw signs of it improving as we went on, although you can't take much against how bad Mayo were. That was probably lulled me into a false sense of security. I would be disappointed by the manner of defeats and the fact that a lot of the goals seemed to come a similar way where Dublin looked weak enough under the high ball. I would be in the own realms of false humility, where I'm actually a little bit worried, although I'm not sure if I am.
What does that mean? The own realms of false humility?
Well, the Kerry realms of false humility.
There's no false humility here. I'm just stating a fact that...
What's the Dublin version of Yarra?
Sure. Jesus.
Jesus.
Jesus, it's only the league. Jesus, they were 2 weeks back.
Well, no, that's not how Yarring works. If you say it's only the league, you're actually playing up Dublin's potential. You got to say, Jesus, the league is the most important competition.
Oh, so that's the opposite of Yarra is Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
But also anything that comes within a Yarra and another Yarra is a lie. That's the sort of understood dynamics.
Yeah, potentially. Like the fact that
Jesus, it's only the league would be a lie because we pretend we're not concerned, but at the same time, we probably would be a little bit concerned.
There's nothing concerning about the inevitability that Dublin will be All-Ireland champions this September.
Stop that.
Darren, you had me at alarmed.
So you're alarmed too?
No, you had me when you said alarmed. I was delighted.
You believed it?
You're starting with John Delaney.
Yes, the FAI repaid the Chief Executive John Delaney's transferred €100,000 the day after they were granted their annual Sport Ireland funding. The Irish Sun reporting today that Delaney had written the cheque to his employer in April 2017 to get them through what they call a temporary cash flow issue. On June 15th, Sport Ireland awarded the FAI grants reported to be in the region of €2.7 million. On June 16th, the very next day, Delaney was repaid the loan of €100,000. On the same day then, he contacted Sport Ireland seeking access to another quarter of the state funding. They had already drawn down 50% earlier in the year prior to the official approval. The paper added that the FAI declined to comment when asked where they obtained the cash to repay the loan to John Delaney. Mick McCarthy says the Republic of Ireland fans will be happy if they win, even if it's ugly. The boys in green start their Euro 2020 qualifiers away to Gibraltar tomorrow. Mick McCarthy's side are due to train on the artificial surface at the Victoria Stadium ahead of their first Euro 2020 qualifier. The squad have been training on the 4G pitch at Abbottstown this week in preparation for the surface. And McCarthy doesn't expect a great game, but says any win will do.
Well, I've never been sacked for winning games, that's for sure. I have no complaints about it at all, but we've got the lads in here on Monday and we're playing on Saturday. Don't think there can be I wonder how long, the managers who are going to clubs get, and they have a pre-season and they set their stall out and they're going to play a certain way. Now we're going to play a bit more attractive and a bit more expansive. I reckon it's my job to get results, and however they would come. And if I get enough of good results, and we're in the European Championships in 2020, we've got the games here, that's got to be my remit. And I can't ever remember, I'm sure we played some scruffy, scrappy times back, the last time I was here, but honestly, I never ever heard any complaints when we'd won a game. I generally heard the fans cheering and enjoying it, and certainly if you get to the competitions, everybody seems to be happy.
Now, Scotland's 3-0 defeat in Kazakhstan dominates the back pages this morning. The Daily Record is calling for manager Alex McLeish to be sacked, saying he must go now for the good of the nation. A poll on their website has 87% of fans calling for him to pay the price for the humiliating defeat. England manager Gareth Southgate is asking fans to forgive Declan Rice and give him a good reception tonight. The 3-times capped former Ireland international could make his England debut against the Czech Republic in a Euro 2020 qualifier. Rice's apology for posting pro-IRA messages dominates today's back pages as well, and some of the front pages. The midfielder used the phrase "up the Ra" on a number of occasions on Instagram, while a Republic of Ireland youth international. Here's what Southgate had to say.
Yeah, I don't think he can do or say any more than he said at this point in time.
The FA has done so much work with a minority of England supporters that chant songs in support of anti-IRA songs, shall we say. You've spoken out on that yourself as well. Does this undermine that sort of work?
Well, we have to make sure that it doesn't. Our messaging doesn't change, and I think Declan's statement is consistent with that. We still would be against any of our supporters taking up that sort of stance, and I don't think anything changes from an FA or England point of view.
Do you fear it might make it more difficult for him to be accepted, though, by some England supporters?
Well, I think people understand. Most people will have children of those sorts of ages, and people are still maturing at that age, and you're in conversations with friends that you can get giddy and you can say things that maybe you don't even know enough about, or you don't understand the context. So I think our fans and our public will recognise that fact, I'm sure.
Shamrock Rovers can move 7 points clear at the top of the SSE Electricity League Premier Division table this evening. The league leaders travel to Ballybuffet to play Finn Harps. It's the only top flight fixture during the international break. The First Division tabletoppers Shelbourne can extend their lead with a win away to Cove Ramblers. Bray Wanderers in second, only behind Shells on goal difference, go to bottom side Wexford, while Athlone have also won 3 of their 4 games so far, and they play Longford. Finally, golf. Padraig Harrington 8 shots off the pace after his second round of the Maybank Championship in Malaysia. Europe's Ryder Cup captain followed up an opening round 70 with a 1 over par round of 73. The Dubliner playing for the first time in 4 months after breaking a bone in his wrist. Harrington is 1 under for the tournament, and Nacho Alvira of Spain has a 3-shot cushion on 9 under.
Darren, thanks a million for that. The Dundalk manager, Vinnie Perth, was in studio with Nathan last night, and some really interesting and honest stuff from him, including this one about missing out and being involved with Stephen Kenny's Irish Under-21 coaching ticket.
Well, I think when you're involved in football and whether it's under 8, under 12, 14, you always dream. So when there was talk of Stephen Kenny becoming the next manager, I dreamed of becoming the next, and I probably wouldn't have got the assistant manager's role. That would have been somebody with a bigger name. But I did have visions of standing at a European Championship. I did have visions of going to a World Cup with him, and that I'd be telling lies if I said that wasn't what I dreamed or what I thought of. Or when I was on the treadmill, when your mind goes and you daydream, I would have thought of that around that time. But
was there a chance to plead your case, or was it that sort of situation?
No, it wasn't that situation in any way, shape or form. As I said, I'd moved on. In my position as assistant manager, I was very, very close to the players. So within that sort of window, my first thought was, how do I relay this to the players? How do I tell them that there's no sort of, we won't have, this train is not going to break? And straight away I switched on to, I've got to look after the players.
That was Vinnie Perth on the show with Nathan last night. As you can hear, Andy Dunne has joined us in the studio, as is Alan Quinlan, and they're colour coordinated as well. Morning. So fair play to you lads.
Well, you're wearing the green, so we said we'd bring some blue.
The 1 point of agreement that I understand we're going to have here over the next little while. So we've decided at a little bit of a remove that it's been quite a traumatic couple of months from a Irish rugby perspective, and 2 people had slightly different views on why this was the case. We decided we'd bring you in to make the case. So I suppose in any good debate, lads, if you want to start off by...
Slightly different views. My views on Tuesday and on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, when I watched the game back, were more... of course there's issues and there's specifics, and you need to have sound evidence for those issues, but just the collective picture of we're finished, it's over, all the negativity was too much. There's reasons for everything, you know what I mean?
So you think there was too much negativity, that it's not as broken as
there has to be criticism, and you have to, and Andy'll know, on any team I've ever played in, you've got to take it in the chin. And I've sat in dressing rooms where you're fit to bust the wall down with frustration and anger, and coaches are the same. They put a lot of effort. Everybody puts a lot of effort, particularly when you're getting paid to do it. It's more pressure, but there's reasons why you lose matches. Sometimes it's a bit of luck, sometimes it's you're beaten by a better team, sometimes you underperform, sometimes there's broader and bigger issues, and all of those things are open for debate and discussion, and I'd value everyone's opinion on it, but you got to back it up with sound evidence. So in general, no, it's not Andy, I'm just saying in general, there's nothing to do with him. I respect his opinion because he's an intelligent former out half, and they were usually the ones who had the most intelligence, not like a forward like me. But I think just in general, some of the stuff, and this wasn't even to have a go at any reporters or anything, because all those guys are very, very understanding of the game, but there was just the social media side of it, and 1 or 2 reports that were
Grant. Well, look,
that's where I was coming from. I wanted to clarify that.
And Andy, you're coming from a place where you think the book needs to stop here with Joe Schmidt in a way that I haven't really heard many others make the case for this week.
I think he's got to reflect on his own approach at the moment, but I don't think. I think in the difficulty that we're currently facing, I think there's opportunities in it, both for him and for the team. And while it looks like we had a very, very poor Six Nations, we were well below par in terms of what we became accustomed to in 2018. I think there are very specific areas that are concerning, and I suppose the simplest way to phrase it for me is that I'm concerned we're going to try and continue to play the exact same way and execute it better. And if that's the case, I'm very worried, because I think everyone who is coming up against us now for the next 6 to 8 months, and obviously we've only 3 or 4 friendly games and then a World Cup, they're very aware of what we're trying to achieve. And it was brilliantly successful, it was brilliantly executed for 2018, and unfortunately, you know, you never really stand still in professional sport. You either get better or you get worse. And right now we're disimproving at that style of play for the same reasons Quinny said. It's multifactorial. Our own execution was poor. Angus Gardner had a couple of dodgy decisions. For whatever reason, the roof was open, that affected things.
And I think their confidence is affected as well.
And their confidence is affected. And all those things come together.
Into the mistakes, doesn't it? Because if you're not confident, you
True. But for me, if you are trying to control every facet of play, which it seems like Joe was trying to do, he's trying to increase the amount of rucks we have. He's trying to govern what happens on the field at almost every area of the field and at every time and in every space. And I think, you know, I saw a quote during the week, Drew Brees, the famous, he's a Super Bowl winner, New Orleans Saints quarterback. He said, sometimes stuff breaks down and you got to go play some football. And at the moment, when stuff breaks down, we're going straight back to doing the plan that Joe has prescribed, and it's not working. So I wonder, is he giving the players the freedom to express themselves? Is there a chance for them to go outside the plan? It doesn't look like that, because they maintained the same plan. And against Wales, the forward pack had 155 carries for an aggregate total of 144 metres. And if Quinny I played with Quinny, I played against him, he battered me a few times. But when he came around the corner of a ruck, if I was marking him, he either battered into me or he threw a missed pass to Rua Tupoki. And I didn't know which he was going to do. Now, if CJ Stander comes around the corner, I know what he's going to do. He's going to run into me. And if I'm big enough and strong enough to stop him, that's what happens. And CJ comes around again and he'll do it 20 more times in the match. But as long as I can stop him, I can stop him, and that's what's happened.
Does Joe need to make a personnel change then? And
he does,
because I think he's been very good at cutting his slot according to his measure. You know, so he's won in the last 6 championships. We've won 50% of them. Wales finished 5th 2 years ago. And I do agree with the point that sometimes I would like the individual, but I think that's an individual thing as well. And then people say maybe they're a bit fearful that Joe will give out to them if they make a mistake. But the one frustration I would have with some of the carries is they don't put enough footwork on.
Yeah.
There's not someone it's trying to run out over someone. And I don't think the coach is going to give out to you if you find a bit of space and a gap.
But we're not saying that putting a bit of footwork on is what's been responsible for the last couple of months. Like Andy's points about Schmidt being too much of a dictator, essentially.
Micromanaging everything. Andy's saying.
And the game plan being too much the same for too long. Do you go with both of those points?
My problem with that is I think now, between now and the World Cup, they do need to evolve and come up with different, tweak things a little bit. What served them so good? It's so quick since November, you know what I mean? It's a very short space of time to go, God, all this is wrong now. The fundamentals of the game is having a good set piece, being robust defensively, being really efficient at the breakdown. They're things that, have to continue and you want to be successful. We average, I made a few notes on this, we averaged 184 passes a game. Wales averaged 124. They're Grand Slam champions. They got no bonus point try. But we've averaged 27. We've averaged 27 defenders beaten a game. You can challenge me on these.
Yeah.
27 defenders beaten per game in the Six Nations. I know stats can lie. Wales averaged 14. So what are Wales doing differently, I would ask you, than you know, are we, because I've made this point at the start of the week, and I know the number of rucks you're saying that we go to.
Yeah.
I actually think we're overplaying.
We are. I would agree on that.
And when we're hitting a brick wall, and I'm not talking about, and you're the out half. I want the ball to go back in your hands when I'm at the bottom of a ruck and go down the field and find green grass, or even get into a boring scenario of kick tennis and say, fine, it doesn't matter, we're not going to be broken down here. Because Wales did that to us the other day, and they just plucked penalties from here, there and everywhere. A lot of debatable penalties, but that's all they did. So they never really had an ambition, because it wasn't just they didn't play with ambition, they didn't show it throughout the championship. And fair play to them, they've ground out results with incredible fitness level, brilliant defence, unbelievably aggressive at the breakdown. Like, I watched back the game and you look at every breakdown, they were smashing into the side, they were, you know, really, really cynical, and fair play, exactly the way I played, so I can't, it's pot kettle scenario. I'd be the exact same, and I said this to people after the game. If I was a Welsh player the other day, I'd be loving that game. You know, I'd be loving the fact that we're just knocking the stuffing out of the opposition here, and you can feel them deflating. But
Andy, and just that point, Quinny, then about the number of passes that obviously we're putting together, and
that's related to me to saying people saying we don't have ambition.
We don't. We've no ambition. I mean, we had 202 passes against England, but 2 of them were offloads, and most of the passes were 1 yard passes from a 9 to a forward.
We beat more defenders than Wales. Why is that?
We didn't get enough line breaks. They're not. We might beat a defender as a pillar close to a ruck. That counts in a statistic. But if he makes half a yard to beat one defender, it's not a line break. If the percentage of offloads relative to the amount of passes we make is 1%. It's pretty grim. The best teams in the world are all averaging 50 to 60 less rucks per international game. It means, you know, why do we look flat? The reason we look flat, if you keep
offloads in the tournament.
I'm not sure. I don't think it certainly wasn't us. We were bottom. Yeah.
Italy and Scotland. They had the most offloads, and they finished 4th, 5th, 6th.
But if your argument is that offloads doesn't work, New Zealand, you know, have a look at the best team in the world.
I loved doing offloads and popping out of the tackle and stuff like that.
Where my biggest concern is coming is that we have a very labour-intensive game. We are asking guys in attack to hit about 130 to 140 rucks, and that can work. And I was consistent with this during 2018 when we won a Grand Slam.
I don't have a problem, Andy, and I agree.
And I'm consistent with it when we're now playing badly. It's the same criticism when we were winning. I was worried that there's no economy in our game, it's labour intensive, and at some point players are going to find it difficult to rise to the occasion on every given week to hit 140, 130 rucks.
But I don't have a problem with high ruck, the high number of rucks in their half. It's the number of high rucks we have in our own half, which is a problem to me, and that's where, you know, you can't just kick the ball away willy-nilly. I think you have to play maybe sometimes out of your own 22, play a couple of phases, bring up their wingers and try and find a bit of green grass. We tend to slow it down a little bit more, and we attack, and in fairness we go over and back and we try to beat people. I would love to see a situation where we don't probably see enough of them. I know what you think of Johnny Sexton getting the ball off a line out or a scrum and just putting it straight across Aki's in front of Aki and giving it to Gary Ringrose with a bit of just send him off on a flyer and then play some stuff off him. You do need structure for X number of phases, and maybe the players themselves fall back into structure too much when they get to 4 or 5, because you do need, if you go wide here and somebody doesn't make a break or a line break, you need shape and options, and every team has that. And maybe that is the case, that after 4 or 5 phases, if we don't break someone down, that we keep going at the same thing, which maybe needs to change and evolve, where someone
But do you think it's going to change, or do you think it'll be allowed to change?
Well, to be fair, I think you're talking about the coach taking. I think Joe will take responsibility for this. Like, ultimately, he'll look back at this and he'll say, well, yeah, I think he's a very intelligent man.
Absolutely.
And what he's done so far has worked incredibly well. They've hit a brick wall. Maybe he's hit a brick wall, and I'm confident that he'll some personnel changes, but some tactical changes as well. Like, they do score a lot, to be fair to Mandy. They do score a lot over the years, and he's been renowned for coming up with strike plays. Like, we got one last year in Twickenham, that Standers one, which was incredible. Brilliant one in Stockdale in Murrayfield. And
so what's happened on that point then? What's happened to
the French one and the All Blacks? So he's coming up with those strike
What's
plays.
happened to Joe Schmidt since? Great coach, as Quinny is saying, sort of clever guy. Clearly, he has shown the capacity to be a very attack-minded, very different coach than he is now. So what's happened?
I just think that we have adopted a very, very similar approach to 2018, and that's forgivable, seeing as it was so successful. But I think opposition coaches went away and analysed what was it that gave us great success. And initially it was our forward pack carrying, winning collisions, being aggressive and getting over the gain line, which gave us momentum, and I think facilitated us being creative
as well, and
a brilliant line out, and a brilliant scrum.
None of that stuff, right? For everything we understand with international rugby, that would have been parsed to bits, right? As he would be doing with other teams.
Sure.
How is he not smart enough then to know that actually that's exactly what's going to happen? We need to tweak it up. We need to change for this Six Nations, and we need to change for the World Cup.
Without going into the specifics, with Andy's points are there's relevance to them. I think we didn't cope with pressure, and that pressure came from, like, the opposition analysing us, but not analysing us and saying, well, Ireland attack here, Ireland attack there, smashing Ireland in those first 1 to 5 phases, and then saying, well,
what have you got now?
What have you got now? And
we didn't have anything.
Our counter-attack isn't great, to be fair. If someone kicks downfield, we don't have a brilliant counter-attack.
I can speculate a bit, and you hear how training is. I think the vast majority of training, the content of training, is broken down into working on an excellent set piece and working on those 4 to 5 killer plays. There's a lot of time and a lot of players coming in and out, and they need to know roles. They're very role specific, and they're very territory specific, and there's multiple inputs for players in terms of knowing their role, and you hear a lot of that coming out of Joe's camp. If I know my role, if I know my position, and we execute, everything works. But I think the vast majority of play, 45 minutes of open play in an international, approximately, about 80% of that is unstructured chaos. And Lancaster would often say, guys have got to be comfortable in chaos, and they're not sure from where the defence is coming. I think we're spending way more of a percentage of our time in training working on structured play as opposed to unstructured. And if there was to be a transition in the next few months to allow that happen, Scott Wisemantle was brought in for the English team, and their response to losing to Wales was, we need to embrace risk and danger and encourage players 20 minutes every session to do wild, risky things, creative things. They don't come off in training, you haven't lost a Six Nations game, but if you never try them, they're certainly not going to get implemented in the cauldron of a Six Nations game.
Do you have the confidence for that change to happen before the World Cup?
No, I don't. I don't believe. I think he's going to really dig his heels in and go back to saying the players need to execute the same plan better, and that's my biggest concern. And I think if we were to just change a few things, I think if he was to concede
they'll execute. I think they've got to.
They certainly can execute better.
Yeah, I think they can, and I think if they're the ones imposing themselves, I don't think we need to change a huge amount.
Neither do I.
Have a sense that I'd love to see a little bit more responsibility from the individual to take on people, but
that's empowerment. That's responsibility.
Are we not saying Darren's not told come in off the wing then when he comes in and he attacks?
I'm not sure he is.
We're not saying that if they execute a little bit better, we're not saying that that's going to win us a World Cup. Like you are actually saying we need to change significantly.
I'm saying the changes are very manageable. As Quinny said, if you throw a ball 2 wide passes from deep as opposed to doing a box kick with Conor Murray, that's a completely easy change for top players to make.
Kick is an option a bit more,
you know, it brings up their fullbacks and you kick long into open space. If you use a bit more width in your attack, the defence either marks that with width, at which point there's more space between them, or they stay narrow and your passing is good enough, you go around them. These are not beyond the scope of these great professional players.
We're the lowest team for kicking in the competition, this thing. We were accused in the first game of being boring and kicking the leather off the ball. England kicked the ball 42 times. This will tell you, it's perception and picture as well. And to be fair, Andy, like England kicked the ball 42 times against France in Twickenham. 42 times, that's phenomenal. Nobody after the game went, England kicked the leather off the ball today.
They weren't box kicks in our own 22 that got us nowhere. They were attacking kicks that led to tries.
And that's what I'm moving on to. I'm thinking our strategy, our kicking strategy. You look at Owen Farrell in the first game in Twickenham, and Rog highlighted as well, who was an expert at it. A lot of his kicks, they kicked more against us that day as well, but a lot of his kicks were on the run kicks. They were punts, boom, picking corners, dinks over
low
the top,
trajectory as opposed to
punted one up the middle when Henshaw was out of position, and you know they got a lot of profit from that. So tactically our kicking needs to improve, and I'd like to speed up some of the exits. There is a absolutely 100% role for the Conor Murray box kick out of defence. If you win a line out on your 22, you're pulled down, it's a bit of a mess. You might have to do one or two pick and goes or reset it. You know, there's times where you have to slow it down. The attack from Ireland, where they have a ruck from a kickoff and they go across the field and they're trying to get a bit of width, like, the question is, are they trying to get width for the sake of it? Are they trying to get it out to Stockdale, who can take on his opposite winger? You know, I think the players need to take a bit more responsibility. I always remember this with Munster and it was something that frustrated me during my career there, is sometimes I felt at periods of that time that we were trying to set up plays rather than attack. So off a line-up, we win it. The 12 is hitting up the middle. Is that 12 just hitting up the middle, or is he actually trying to take on his opposite number? And if he goes past him, well, what do we do then? Like you're saying, to react to that. So every play, I think that, you know, I would like the mentality to be, if you're going wide, you understand that, okay, there's probably going to be a tackle, and then we have an X number of hits back and whatever. But is that winger taking on his winger? First and foremost, his first goal and mentality should be to try and beat my man. Obviously, if there's open space there, he can. But if you're taking on a player, and so maybe it's a little bit of a change of mentality as well. I don't think we need to have a massive shift in what we do. We need to evolve a little bit more. And I'm not an expert on kicking, but I always get up off the bottom of rucks thinking, Jesus, brilliant kick, Rog, spinning into touch, you're 40, 50 yards up the field. It's not always easy to do that. But I think teams have really blocked off that frontline channel. They've said Ireland don't tactically kick a lot. Now, we saw one with Jordan Larmour right at the start of the game where France had a lot of defenders in the front field, and I think the fullback should have covered it better, but there was a lot of space there, and you see the return line-out try in the corner. Those kicks and those types of kicks, they give the players a massive psychological lift, a real feel-good factor. If you're hammering away for a few minutes trying to win resource rucks in your own 22, and then someone puts in a brilliant kick, a wiper kick, a grubber kick, and you're getting position upfield. Ireland hammering away at opposition defences, and just that's what happened to them in this tournament. So maybe it's a mental thing, but it is probably a tactical switch as well. I think Joe will make little tactical tweaks that he has to. I don't think he has to go away from where we were.
It doesn't feel like as if we're in the space though of just little tactical tweaks.
There's going to be
given what happened to us against England and given what happened to us against Wales, it feels like we are
played
very,
into
very
all
far
those
off
teams'
pace.
hands with the way we played, by trying to hold on to the ball a lot and by not kicking more. I think we weren't cynical enough, and I was a fan of being cynical. Andy will vouch for that. We're too nice a little bit. We're not, like, we were bullied. I said this at the start of the week. So Alan Wynne-Jones is someone I played with a lot and know him really well, and I knew exactly what he was going to do. He was going to close that Ireland line out. James Ryan, for the first time, is calling the line outs, which he'll learn a lot from, and he'll get better from that, and he's a future Ireland captain. Incredible player. They're closing the line out, they're throwing people across in the air. all those niggly little frustrating things started to irritate Ireland, because they're a side who are hoping a performance will happen rather than making a performance and creating one. Their desire and their endeavour and absolutely walking out onto that stadium the other day, they would have been pumped to the gills for that game. They start terribly and then the confidence drains. So it's a bit more than... There's a big picture here, and I do agree with you. There is some change, personnel change, tactical change, but I don't think it's as catastrophic as some would say. Are you telling me Wales, and this is a question I would ask anyone watching or anyone listening, are Wales now suddenly a team that are going to win the World Cup? Because that's what
contenders, aren't they?
That's what I heard on Saturday. So, scoring 10 tries in the Six Nations Championship, is that a World Cup winning team?
They know how to win. One thing
is that a World Cup winning team?
I would think that their prospects right now, as we look at it, and all evidence.
So over how many games is to win a World Cup?
They have a better
4 pool games. They have a better quarterfinal, 7 games. So this over 6 games this time they scored 10.
I think they currently have a probably as a bookie. If you're a bookie, you would say they have a better chance than we do.
But do they attack more than us?
No, they attack less than us. That's the point.
Well, should we just go back and do what they do then? If you're talking about an evolution?
You give a guy 6 hours to chop down a tree, and smart guys spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. We just run into the tree for 6 hours.
But so that's my point.
We're not economical.
So should we kick more then and just defend more and force teams into opposition?
Look at Raj coaches Canterbury Crusaders, and they've won 9 or 10 Super 15 rugby championships by having the least amount of possession. Possession isn't king anymore. Defence is their king. You don't need to have possession and keep running into it.
The trend is more kicking. It's coming back into the game.
I would have thought if we can, I would say it's not catastrophic. If we can vary our game, add in an attacking kick game, a smarter defensive kicking game, and embrace a little bit of creativity, empower the players to make a few decisions off the cuff and spend a bit more time in training, working on the unstructured side of things. They are easy fixes for a man of Schmidt's intellect and a team of this quality. My concern is that I'm not sure if Joe is going to implement those type of things, because I think what brought success in 2018
Joe's never coached me, so I can't say. But
one thing. I think we have to wrap shortly, and you have to go. And
what's the rush, Adrian?
I have to go to work.
He needs to go to work. That's the rush. You hang around for a while. Don't worry about that. One thing that you said at the weekend was that I'd nearly absolve all these players of any responsibility to this. How do you square that off with looking at the likes of, and the list is as long as your arm, so no particular order, and certainly not exhaustive, but Sean O'Brien, Johnny Sexton, Conor Murray, Rory Best, Sean Cronin, Peter O'Mahony, etc., right, in terms of their performances. How do you square those two things off? Because, surely they have to have some responsibility in this.
I think they all have responsibility. They do. I'm saying if the performance is that bad on a given day, I think there's an underlying malaise to how you're trying to play. And it's so uncharacteristic of those players to be that bad. They can have an off day here and there.
Is it not up to the players, the senior players? Are you telling me Johnny Sexton's going to afraid to go to Joe and say, we want to play more, we want to do this? They've got to take responsibility.
I would say Johnny's not. I think every other player probably is.
I don't know. I think that is Rory Best, the senior player. Surely that's the whole function of it.
But I don't think Rory's going to go and ask to change anything, to be honest.
Well, they've got to go and ask to make some changes now and review it and see, what's gone wrong.
Well, will they?
I just remember from any team I've ever played in, player input is as important. Now, maybe they're fearful of Joe.
Well, I think they are. Yeah. So I mean, that's a different question altogether. So I'm absolving the players. That's what the question was. Can you absolve players of a bad day? Of a bad day.
Of a bad championship.
Oh, not of a whole bad championship. I said on Saturday evening, looking at how poor that performance was against Wales, I said there's something else that is happening there, that quality of player can look so poor. I said there's something else going on here. It's a tiredness with trying to implement something that they now find very, very difficult to do. And it just Johnny, Connor.
It's not a tiredness, Andy.
I think it's a tiredness with being asked to run into brick walls 140 times a game.
These guys play 20, 22, 3 games a year.
I think there's no capacity for them to express themselves. They're not getting a creative input. They're being asked to run into brick walls repeatedly. When it's been found out and stopped physically, it's been asked of them to do it better, and they're tired.
What was wrong with 2018 then?
Because it worked. and teams worked us out and stopped us. It worked because it was the first time we did
everything that we've.
I never said we should bin everything. I never said we should bin everything. I said we should be allowed to change a few things, and they should be allowed some more creative input.
And that's my whole point at the start.
But you think? I don't think they're going to get it.
Well, Joe, I think Joe is intelligent enough.
He is.
And the other coaches, Andy Farrell, Simon Easterby, in their review, and that was my whole point. Your points are, they're very strong opinions and they're very, very relevant, and I respect them because you, as I said, you were a decision maker on the field. But they've got to collectively as a group, not just Joe. It's not like Joe, they have to challenge him now. If Johnny Sexton or Bundy Aki or Gary Ringrose thinks, well, we need to attack better, or Rob Kearney or whatever, senior players, they've got to say that and say we need to do it. So it's not.
I would never absolve them of responsibility if they don't go to Joe now as a group and say, here are the things we think ought to happen. At high level business world and management, if you've got executive level who don't give feedback to a CEO and say, actually, we need to change, then they're not good executive level management. We have a 7-8 strong panel of top senior players who need to go in and say, we need to tweak X, Y, and Z, because it seems to me there's a hierarchical structure. He's demanding
sound information themselves, and
I'm sure they're capable of it.
Prove to him that do it this way, and we'll get X, Y, and Z, because you know what, the information. And Paul O'Connell always told me this about Joe, and I would really value his opinion that Joe will show you something, and then it happens in a game, and the player goes, this is the information I've got, this is what he taught me would happen.
Only now they're looking at that and they're thinking it's not actually working. Yeah, because we've hit a wall,
and look, it's somewhere in between, Adrian.
Are you hanging around, or
it's somewhere in between.
Are you hanging around, or are you going as well?
Let's see what happens, because...
he's not listening to me, I presume that means he's going. Right, listen lads, we'll come back to this again. Thanks for Quinny. Andy, thanks a lot for that.
Thanks guys.
Andy Dunne, give it a plug there.
Give him a plug, Come on. Get some business.
We're looking after people who are generally over the age of 60. We're not looking after any sports people. And they're usually people who have, arthritic issues, cardiac issues, diabetes, and they need someone to manage their lifestyle, get them back in the golf course, playing with their grandkids, enjoying themselves.
I'm not in that age group yet, but it sounds like
the Irish lads see if they can enjoy their lives again.
Put me down. I'm not in that bracket yet. Put me down for 2 or 3 years. I'll be feeling like
website. Personalhealth.ie.
What if you're feeling?
This is a great plug.
What if you're feeling 60?
Yeah,
is that relevant?
Seven Quinny will be booking in next week. Thanks, Willie, lads. Enjoyed that. Cheers for that. Jason Quigley joined us on Off the Ball. He was on last night and he was talking about his hopes of a world title.
Is there any chance of you bringing a big fight to Ireland in the next couple of years?
Without a doubt, and I've been saying it now these last few years, I think it only makes sense for me I was a very well-known fighter and very well established over here in Ireland and the UK. Just before I turned professional, and then I turned professional and had all my fights in over in America and got very well established over there with the Mexicans, everything like that. So I have a great mixture now of the kind of UK Irish, the American, Mexican, and now it's about time bringing it all back together again, but bringing it back together back at home where it all started, and this is the start of it now. It makes sense for me to fight more on this side of the water over the UK, and as I said, when I come back to Ireland to fight, I want it to be a big fight, and what better way to do it than bringing Golden Boy Promotions to Ireland for a massive fight one day.
Jason Quigley on the show there last night. A few sly digs thrown there as the two lads, a few sly shoulders as the two lads left the studio. There was easily another 45 minutes conversation and all that, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was like it's like that video. Have you seen the two guys on the footpath in America where they're just giving each other the middle finger and not actually punching each other or anything like that?
Oh yes, yeah.
Kind of felt like that.
On the footpath in America.
Yeah, well, we can post a link to it.
There's a high point of the morning. Loads of comments coming in over the course of that piece. Tony Kennedy wondering if either of the lads could explain to why all of our players going forward take a ball from a standing start. That was certainly, I think, one of the criticisms that would have come up over the course of the conversation. Thanks for the comment, Tony. Thanks when you for getting in touch. Likewise to Kevin Donoghue, who says, to be fair to Barry and Sexton, the weight on the shoulders is massive when they play for Ireland. We need, in my opinion, we need to have those players in place that can take the pressure off them. So a bit of collective responsibility, I suppose, is the point there. Bernard Ryan is the last one we'll take on the rugby for the minute. Thought it's been terrible, the pressure that the media has put on the team. Sean Cronin had one bad game and he was still spoken about 3 weeks later about how he had an off day. There's still time to change things to work. I'd rather a bad Six Nations and then a good World Cup. I'm sure Joe Schmidt has a new game plan that will take shape for the World Cup. That's from Bernard Ryan, who needs to pull his head out of the sand and sort of see what's going on over the last couple of months. And I mean, it ain't the media's fault, Bernard. I'm sorry to break that news to you.
Definitely is the criticism of Sean Cronin that has completely scuppered Ireland's hopes of regaining the Six Nations. There's like when Andy talks about like not having the confidence in Ireland actually making the required changes necessary to go and be a challenger at the World Cup. Because reading Malachy Clerkin in the Irish Times on Monday, and he was making the point, a very point that I completely agree with, that you talk about a coach leaving and the effect that may have on a squad, and clearly Warren Gatland is leaving Wales and that's not having the exact same effect on their squad, so it can't be down to that. But Malachy was making the point that Joe Schmidt isn't going on to take a new coaching role that Warren Gatland seems to be doing. Joe Schmidt is going to take a break from rugby to focus on family time. Is there a chance here that Joe Schmidt is just burnt out? Like, he's not moving on to pastures new. He's moving on to take a break from this thing. Like, as much as that is to focus on his family, is there an element of taking a break from rugby? Is there an element here that Joe Schmidt has got a little bit burnt out from this whole thing?
I mean, I think that's a possibility, but not one that would have an impact on him now. I think he would, even if, I mean, burnt out is such a strong expression, even if he was feeling, let's say, fatigued by the level of work and the pressure that comes with it, because I think we'd all accept that that's there, I still think that he understands that he needs to get to October and then that's his cliff edge, that after that, as you say, he is going to have at least some sort of a period of downtime, that he would understand that that's just something he needs to work towards, that it's everything he's been doing for the last four years is going to culminate in this World Cup, and that'll be, regardless of the Grand Slams and the Six Nations Championships wins, that'll be the thing that ultimately he will be defined by. And I think that he's clever enough to say, well, even if I am feeling fatigued by this thing now, is that to say that he can't come up with a new game plan to challenge Wales in a way that we didn't at the weekend? Like, I definitely don't buy that.
No, fair enough. I think there might be an noble truth in it. Like, I mean, there's like, what are you working towards? You're working towards this end game this year. Like, it's a tough process now for him to try and think about how he's going to change things, because he doesn't have any hands-on time with the players. And like, I don't know, like, burnt out is a strong term.
I'm saying he could be invigorated by the idea that he's going to have some time off after October. Suddenly, like, the release that comes with letting everybody know that that's what's happening, and that he isn't in the Gatland thing where Gatland could go on to be the England coach after that, or he could go on to become the New Zealand coach, or whatever it is. Like, that he's still on the treadmill, whereas Schmidt is like, right, get this done into October, put everything I have into it until then, and then I can chill out.
Yeah, well, let's hope that's the case. Let's hope that everybody gets a little bit reinvigorated from this time away from one another over the next couple of weeks and months.
The more I think about it, the more I'm with Bernard, and he's got something up his sleeve, and it'll be grand. Be all fine. Don't worry about it. The FAI and Glow Football, delighted to let you know, are pleased to announce a partnership with Marvel Studios to celebrate the release of Captain Marvel in Irish cinemas. Glow Football is a great initiative putting the focus on having a good time over being the best player on the pitch. The main hope is to entice girls into the sport who may never have played before, or who may have played but for whatever reason may have just fallen out of the sport. It's also taking away any inhibitions of body image or making mistakes, and to allow everyone to enjoy the game in the way that they should. So over the coming weeks, the FAI are hosting a number of Captain Marvel themed Glow Football sessions throughout Ireland, and Captain Marvel itself is in Irish cinemas. Now it's already taken apparently over £2 million at the Irish box office, so flying it. And for more details you can head over to glowfootball.fai.ie. That's pretty much where we're going to leave that for today. We've an interview upcoming that Owen has already done with Seán Hartnett, but for the minute on, thanks a million for that.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Are you sort of off to be fatigued for the weekend and then come back refreshed on Monday and ready for action?
Burnt out. Sick of this shit.
Well, look, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy Hyde Park in Roscommon.
Yeah, it's the highlight.
Yeah.
It's like you're just... I'm now starting to think that this inevitability that is me getting my comeuppance once again, which is getting a sporting prediction completely wrong, once again will happen on the Sunday, and there'll be an 11-point swing, and there will be no league final.
Well, if that happens, it'll be at the top of the show on Monday, and the clip will be replayed ad nauseum, I would assume.
Yeah,
the arrogance of the Kerry arrogance.
Well, I'm saying right here, right now, that there's a chance that it may not happen, so I don't think that's very.
Your season ticket is still valid for obviously the last game of the group stages. You can still get in with your season ticket.
Yes.
This weekend.
What else am I going to get?
And then after that, is your season ticket still for if it comes to the final, for example, as you say, Kerry are going to be in, you can still go with your season ticket at that point?
Yeah, what else will we get in with? What are you asking?
No, I wasn't sure, just teasing it out.
Right, it's a very unusual question. I'm sure everybody at home will agree.
Yeah.
Very unusual question.
Okay, that's almost it from us this morning on. Thanks a million. Enjoy your weekend.
No, thank you. You too. What are you doing for the weekend?
What am I doing for the weekend? I've no great plans, Owen, to be honest with you. I have to look after my own children tonight on my own, so that's going to be... If I can get through that this evening, I think I deserve a bit of R&R over the weekend.
I regret asking the question.
In 2008... this is just ahead of our interview here with Seán Hartnett. He's written a new book called Client Confidential. We gave you a little bit of a teaser to it earlier on. He left the British Army in 2005. He was operating as a covert surveillance technician at JCU NI, which was the top secret counter-terrorism unit in Northern Ireland. He remained in covert surveillance though, and his book details the varying areas of Irish life that he operated in over the last 15 years. Chapter 6, however, is the chapter that we focused in on. In his book, it details encounters with the IRFU after the 2007 Rugby World Cup. The IRFU has refuted, we must say, a number of details in the book. They've released to us a statement saying that in 2008 the committee of the IRFU sanctioned their attention of RMI, a highly regarded and reputable risk assessment and security consultancy, to conduct a wide-ranging risk assessment of the then newly occupied IRFU headquarters building, their IT systems, hotel accommodation, meeting facilities being used by the Irish team and the IRFU, and our general approach to business confidentiality in line with best business practices of the day. They go on to say the IRFU continues to conduct such assessments across all of its business operations. It's apparent that the author, they say, of Client Confidential has fictionalised many elements of the account of the IRFU's engagement with RMI and has exercised extreme degrees of artistic licence in his portrayal of the process undertaken. For the record, IRFU has never attained the services of or worked with a Seán Hartnett. So let's hear from Seán Hartnett. It's his pseudonym, and he's the man at the centre of this story and the author of the book Client Confidential.
Okay, so this is a brand new book. It's called Client Confidential. It's written by Seán Hartnett, a former member of the British Army. It's a second book. This one is called Spooks, Secrets and Counter-Espionage During the Celtic Tiger, and one of the chapters focuses on the IRFU around the year 2008, post the World Cup in 2007, which has garnered a lot of attention really over the past couple of days. And I'm delighted to say the author of the book, Seán Hartnett, joins us on the line. You're very welcome to the show, Seán.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much for having me.
So we'll start by talking about your background, first of all, before we get into the chapter on the IRFU. You're a former surveillance technician in the Joint Communications Unit, the JCU, in Northern Ireland.
That's correct. I kind of ended up there more by accident than by design. I didn't really know what unit I was going to when I was being posted there. I knew I was going to this unit called Joint Communications Unit Northern Ireland, but it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't tell you anything about the unit. The only things I did know was it was extra pay and I didn't have to wear a uniform. So for any soldier, that's a bonus. So when I ended up getting there, I realised what I had gotten myself in for, and it wasn't what I had expected. It was a covert surveillance unit operating in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, basically was your role to act as a spy, or was it to counter surveillance?
No, my job was to build surveillance devices, fit them to vehicles, and disguise them as rocks, and fit overt and covert cameras, listening devices, whatever was needed by the operators on the ground.
Right, okay. Then you proceed to leave the British Army in 2005. As I said, this is your second book, and I understand the British Army tried to ban your first book?
Yes, it is. Very, very, very hard they tried, but it wasn't possible. So, yeah, they came pretty hard for it.
How hard are we talking here? Did they get in touch with you directly?
No, they've never been in touch with me directly, but they tried through my publisher, I believe, they tried through the High Court in London to get a court order to ban it, and it was successful.
Right, okay. Let's talk about this book. Let's talk about Client Confidential. And chapter 6 is called Rugby Sweeps. And you kind of paint a picture at the start of the chapter about being in the Ballsbridge Hotel in the year 2008. Eddie O'Sullivan is in big trouble after a poor World Cup in 2007. Could you just talk to us about the first time the IRFU makes contact with you?
Well, I was first brought in to basically analyse a sweep that was being done on their behalf that day for a team meeting at the Ballsbridge Hotel. So it was for a players meeting. And when I got there, there was an operator already there carrying out a TSCM sweep, which is basically a sweep for listening devices or covert surveillance devices. And it was obvious from the outset that this guy wasn't up to scratch. The room hadn't been sealed, none of the sockets had been checked, none of the furniture had been moved. So he was basically just walking around with this kind of wand in his hand, and that was it. It was over within sort of 40 minutes, which isn't possible to sweep 2 meeting rooms that would take you, the best part of a day, sweep two large meeting rooms like that and to seal it off properly. So that was my first involvement.
Why was the sweep being carried out at that moment? Why were the IRFU in high alert?
Well, at the previous Irish committee meeting at the Shelburne Hotel, Philip Brown had concerns that there was information leaked from that meeting, and it had been leaked to the media. And it had been so accurate, the leak, that the information that had gotten back to the media, he had concerns that it might have been an electronic listening device that had picked up on it and recorded the entire conversation at the meeting.
This was a meeting that contained information that Eddie O'Sullivan was in trouble with his role and that Declan Kidney may be amongst the replacements.
Exactly. They were discussing who might be coming in, and that would hamper any recruitment process, obviously. If it gets out into the public domain that, X, Y, or Z are up for the job, their current clubs or countries might be thinking, well, they're on the way out before they've even negotiated with us. So, it's very sensitive information. Someone's coming under a new contract.
Of course it is. How confident was he in the fact that the room might have been bugged? How did he know that it wasn't just one of the personnel in the room who may have leaked the information?
Well, he didn't. That's just it. But he was belt and braces. He was actually doing the right thing. He was looking to eliminate all possibilities, and one of those possibilities is electronic eavesdropping. There are companies out there, and plenty of them, that will do that for you.
So how soon after that meeting does he get in touch with you?
I was called in probably 2 days before the following team meeting, so that would have been maybe a week or so after.
Right, so you go into the hotel, you look at the room, and you say in the book that the room probably isn't fit for purpose for anti-surveillance anyway, but you say that the crowd that had come in to do it, as you've already mentioned here, weren't up to scratch. Again, the same question kind of applies here. How do you counteract the idea that some of the personnel in the room may have been leaking information in that particular team meeting?
Well, you can't, as this is what I brief all, not just sporting organisations, but any company. Your greatest vulnerability is personnel. There's nothing to stop somebody walking out of that meeting, meeting up for a coffee with a journalist or a rival company, and imparting all that they've gotten at that meeting to that person. You can't stop that. The best way to prevent that is compartmentalisation, and at an organisation the size of the IRFU, that's difficult to do.
I'm sure it is. What exactly was the brief? Because I know you mentioned Ger Carmody as well, and you mentioned that you had to go in and check to see if the other crowd had actually cleaned up the room properly. What was specifically the brief? Was it to check on them, or was it to check on the players or some of the personnel who might have been coming in?
Well, it's when you go in afterwards to make sure that no information has been left behind, which happens a lot, more often than you would think. You've had a meeting, everybody gets up and walks out, thanks very much. And left behind on the desk is little doodles or, notes they've been taken on pieces of paper. That's invaluable. I could collect that up and piece together what's happened in that meeting, or get a very good idea And if you're a would-be, investigative journalist, or you're from a rival team or anything like that, that's gold if you can get that. So any meeting should be, not just beforehand should it be swept and sealed, but afterwards there should be a clean-up operation afterwards.
And was your sense that there was carelessness here on the part that might have actually been happening?
Yeah, I don't think that. To be fair, I don't think they'd ever been briefed on anything like this. What also has to come into consideration here is that this was the kind of cusp of professionalism in Irish rugby. These were the guys that were just coming to the, I don't want to say football star level, but rugby's image was on the rise, and these guys had never had to worry about that before. It wasn't a big deal. Whereas if you go to any of the professional football clubs, and indeed now any of the professional rugby clubs, that's part and parcel of your training. It's how to keep yourself safe from media attention and from, that kind of thing. That's part of the brief now. But it wasn't back then. It was all relatively new.
Did you ever find any bugging of an IRFU room for players or for upper echelon officials?
No, it was far easier than that. Information, again, things like clear desk policies where you should have no information lying around. The real bugbear was they didn't have that mindset yet that information that they had would be valuable to others. That has changed. That wouldn't be the case now. I don't think you could walk into the RFU headquarters now, walk around and pick up what you wanted. I think very much that has changed.
Yeah, so talk to us about that, the IRFU headquarters. Who gave you that mission, that brief to go in and break into the building, essentially?
Well, that was our overall brief. The brief was to find out, was that building bugged, or was there any compromise of the communication system that was in there? And as part of that, we decided to see how easy could we get in and how easy could we obtain information while we were in there. And I have to say, back in that time, it was quite easy. It wasn't difficult at all. Now, subsequent to our brief, a lot of changes were made. And again, you wouldn't be able to do that now.
How did you break into the building? How easy are we talking here? Could I have broken into it, or would you need your level of expertise?
No. It was, I don't want to say too much because obviously I'd be revealing how you would do it. And I don't want to do that for security of other premises, but let's just say I undid 2 screws and shorted the power, and I was into the main building.
Right. That's not something I could do.
Yeah, of course it is. Take 2 screws off the top and put the 2 wires together and the power will drop.
Right. Like that would be kind of your bread and butter from your background.
Yeah, if you wouldn't have to be a former covert surveillance operator to do that. You could be someone who just understands basic power on a lock.
And when you were breaking into locks in the RFU headquarters, is there nobody in the building at the time or anybody who kind of gave you that brief who's a little bit concerned about that, no?
No. I mean, you're not flagging anything. No alarm is going to go off. You've opened, as far as the lock is concerned, you've legitimately opened it. So it's the same as if I put a pass key or I unlocked it. It's not seen it as a break. It's just seen it as I've opened the lock legitimately.
And did nobody, in the building, kind of question who is this man coming in here, and potentially kind of anybody walking by you as you're trying to do this, or was it all kind of secluded in secluded areas and you were in kind of a quiet area to do so?
No, we just walked upstairs. As you come up, there's Philip Brown's office, and then there's a large old plan office, or there was back then, and just kind of went up, and then I left. Thanks very much.
What was Philip Brown's reaction to that when you told him how easy it was?
I would say he was quite shocked. Yeah, but they implemented what was necessary thereafter. It's like anything. Until somebody points out to you, you don't really realise it. I mean, there's probably flaws in everybody's security, and until somebody would look at it and go, "Well, look, this is a problem with your security," you probably never would have entered your head. It's not everybody would have looked at that and went, "Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll open the lock and I'll drop the power."
Yeah. What did you find when you did break in?
Again, there's sort of no clear desk policy. So as we were around. I could open up Philip Brown's personal assistant's diary and have a look. And unfortunately, in there was all the information you would really need about who he was meeting and when. And one of the meeting rooms we opened up, went into, and there written on the board was the salaries of some of the major players. Now, to me, while I'm a rugby fan and it was interesting, not really anything that I would be worth using, but for a journalist it would have been interesting to get hold of that information.
Who was getting paid the most?
I'm not going to answer that. I don't think that's fair. I wouldn't want anybody knowing how much I earn.
The last element actually of your work with the RFU, and the last element of Chapter 6 here that I wanted to ask you about is briefing Declan Kidney. Can you talk to us about that, what your role was in terms of briefing the new Ireland head coach at the time?
Yeah, I think at that point the RFU had realised that, you know, we need to brief the players and the management team in a better way about the dangers of information security. And part of that was to sit down with Declan and say, look, this is what can happen, you know, with regard to your information. You need to keep it tight. You know, when you're having meetings, sensitive meetings, make sure the rooms are secure and, you know, that nobody's walking around with a dictaphone or anything like that. And he was quite open to it. And I also reminded him that not all of his, now I won't use the word enemies, but not all of his greatest fans would be inside the IRFU, and that's something you have to be careful of as well.
You said to him that there was a chance that he might get stabbed in the back from somebody within the IRFU?
Yeah, there were people that didn't want to have appointed. Right. And he knew that. He said he knew he wasn't everybody's favourite cup of tea, so he took it well.
It seems like a strange enough brief for the RFU to give you, to tell Declan Kidney that he might get stabbed by somebody within their own organisation, stabbed in the back, I should say figuratively, by somebody within their own organisation.
By the RFU to tell him that.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I wasn't briefed by the RFU to tell him that. I told him that.
And do you think that Declan Kidney took your advice?
I'd like to think so, yeah. He's a pretty good operator. He wasn't one to mouth off to the press, and he wasn't one to disclose too much information. I don't think that was necessarily all down to me. I think he's a clever enough operator without any of my help. But I'd like to think he took on board what I told him.
Okay, so let's park the rugby there, and speaking generally and separate to what we've just been talking about, do you think that surveillance is happening in other sports?
It's huge. You have to understand that, you know, international sport is a multi-billion euro industry now, and where there's money, people will do what they have to do to get the upper hand. It's not something that's hit and miss anymore. It's something you must be prepared for, particularly at the very high level. You're talking a lot of money here, and ultimately, where there's money, there's skullduggery.
In terms of your own work at the moment, do you get much work on that line at the moment?
I only have a very few select clients now. I only deal with a few set clients. I don't take any more work, and I don't work for any sporting organisations, but I do have colleagues who do, particularly in the UK, who work for some of the big teams, both in football and rugby. And their role is, particularly around, when it's come to major games, is to ensure that the team security, I don't mean physical security, I mean their information security, is up to scratch.
And if you don't mind me asking, do you go by the pseudonym Seán Hartnett for their work as well?
No, I don't.
Right. So they have no idea that you've written a book telling everybody what you did with the RFU?
No, they don't.
Do you think they would have an issue with that?
Oh yeah, major, I would think. I don't, like I say, I don't do too much of that work anymore, hence the reason I wrote the book. If I was trying to make a living out of it now, I don't think I'd be flavour of the month.
The RFU have released a statement about Client Confidential. They said, it is apparent the author has fictionalised many elements in the account of the RFU's engagement with RMI and has exercised extreme degrees of artistic licence in his portrayal of the process undertaken. What's your response to that?
I would have expected absolutely nothing less. I had the same reaction when I wrote Charlie 1, and yet They spent a lot of time trying to ban it. What I would say to people is read them and even read that chapter of it, and you decide whether I could have had that much detail if I hadn't carried out what I'd done.
So you didn't fictionalise any elements of it?
No, it's the operation I carried out as I carried it out.
They say, for the record, the RFU has never retained the services of or worked with a Seán Hartnett. Were you on their books, actually, Seán?
I was through a third party.
Okay. And do you have any idea if the RFU continue to use a third party or anything along those lines?
I have no idea. I couldn't comment on that.
Right, well, congratulations on the book. It's called Client Confidential, Spooks, Secrets and Counter-Espionage During the Celtic Tiger. Seán Hartnett, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.